think we're live. Okay. Oh, like there's a lot going on behind us, isn't there? That's okay. Hello, it's me and Sarah, and we're live, and we're going to be talking about The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So I hope everyone has had a chance to read it, because we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about things and spoilers and all of the stuff. We have tea. I've got my Frank B. Booten owl mug, as he's been named by my children.
Intervention, my choice.
Yes, sir. But Regina insisted it was Frank Booten, so now he is Frank B. Booten. It's fine. Sure. Okay, so I don't know if we'll be able to see. This is different. They changed the way this is set up. Like it's sort of the same, but I don't know. So if you're here, say hi so I can see that the chat works. Because I just don't know what's going to happen here. It's a little bit different. Okay, so let's go ahead and just get started. And so, Sarah, do you want to start or do you want me to start? Of course you want me to start. Okay, so my initial thoughts, let's start with like our initial thoughts about the book. We were just talking about this before to kind of warm up, but I'm going to say that I liked this quite a bit, more than I expected to, because typically I don't read a lot of fantasy. I find I get very like bogged down by the details and like the world building and that sort of thing, and I kind of end up getting pulled out of the story a lot of the time. And I feel like this was almost read more like historical fiction for me. And so I was able to like more easily adapt to this world building because I knew what it was based on and I knew where things were heading. So like I had a frame of reference, and that just made it easier for me to like understand the world building better. And so for me, I don't even think I read this as fantasy. I think I read it more as historical fiction because so much of it was historically accurate. And I also gave this 4 stars.
I read this book like completely differently because while I was aware that it was inspired and based on historical events, like I didn't really know much about what those historical events were. So I was reading this book as straight fantasy, but also differently. I am a big fantasy reader. I don't mind being a little bit confused and having to like slowly figure things out as I go. So
hold on, I'm trying to read the comments.
Like, why can't I hear myself?
Okay, see, I'm not seeing any comments in here. Let me see if I can fix that. Hold on. May not be visible. That's not helpful. So I'm going to try to pay attention to my phone. So I did not mean to interrupt you. Continue.
Where was I?
I don't even know.
I was basically reading this book as straight fantasy because, like, for me that works. I don't need to understand everything all at once. I can kind of figure things out as I go, and a little bit of confusion doesn't bother me. I will say the like military strategy type things I wasn't a big fan of, but like that wasn't enough to like ruin the experience for me. I just kind of accepted that I didn't understand what was going on and just kept going. And honestly, I really loved this book. Like I loved the characters and the world and the plot. It was all very fascinating, and I gave it 5 stars.
Well, see, the only reason I gave it 4 and not 5 is that I felt like the second half like slowed down a lot. Like it really came to like a halt, I feel like, in the middle of the book when the war starts, and it just kind of stayed sort of blah for a while, and then like the third part is when it picked back up again. So I don't know, for me that lull in the middle kind of made it drag, and so it pulled down a star, but I did really like it. So okay, so I can't read the chat on here, so I pulled it up here so we'll be able to see. I don't know, everything's different all the time. I don't know why we can't just have things stay the same. Okay, so let's move on and talk about characters and the different like character relationships throughout the book. Did you have a favorite character?
Personally, while understanding that she was written to be kind of unlikable, I actually really enjoyed Rin as a protagonist. I like when a story has like a really messy, not morally gray or it's like morally ambiguous protagonist. I think that's really interesting and a really interesting dynamic.
Our sound is a bit off. Are you hearing us okay right now?
Because of the air conditioner?
Yeah, you know what? We'll turn off the air conditioner. I'm wondering if we have the AC on. Hold on. Sarah, hit power. Let's turn off the AC and see if that improves our sound quality. Yeah. Turn the fan off too. I know. I'm sorry. You'll be fine. Okay. Is our sound better now? I wasn't even paying attention to the fact that we had the air conditioning on. I intentionally said we should turn it off and then forgot. Okay. So I'm hoping our sound is better now that we have the AC off, and hopefully we won't melt in here because this room gets hot very fast. So, oh, great. Okay. Yeah. I thought it might have been that. All right. I'm sorry. We are so scatterbrained tonight. Like 100 degrees outside. Let's get it together. Okay. So back to characters. You were talking about the character that you liked. Yes, start over because I don't think they could hear you.
So personally, I really liked Rin as a protagonist. It's really interesting because she's not exactly like a good person, and I don't think she was written to be likable, but that's what made me really like her, honestly. I think it's really fascinating when a book has a character that's so morally ambiguous and you really don't know what they're going to do next.
Well, I got the feeling by the end that I knew that she was no longer morally ambiguous. I read that the character of Rin is based on Mao Zedong, and that made me rethink her entire storyline, because now I'm like, oh, I know where this is heading, and it's not good. So I don't know. To me, that made it so much more interesting too. All of the characters are based on real historical people, and everything was based on real historical events. So that just, I think, was really interesting. I did not like Rin as a character. It took me a long time to warm up to her, and I never quite did. And then once I heard that she was based on Mao Zedong, and I'm like, oh, so she's a villain. Get it now. So I don't think she's meant to be likable at all. I did tell Sarah Rin is a Katniss. She's very Katniss-like, and that we only get to see things through her perspective and through her eyes. And we're now reconnecting. Okay. And so because she doesn't always know what's going on, we don't know what's going on. And we're not sure if what she's assuming or thinking about somebody is accurate, because we don't know their motivation. We only know her motivation and what she's seeing through. So it felt very much like a Hunger Games situation where we don't really know what's actually happening here. Is she unreliable as a narrator because she doesn't know what's happening? The whole thing with her not even knowing she was a Spearly, and that's something that would have affected her whole life, and for her not to know that and still not fully believe it until almost the end of the book. I don't know. I found her whole character arc to be really interesting, but she's not a character that I would ever consider a favorite character. If I had to pick a favorite character,
the pig.
Yes, the pigs. That was all great. I would say Jang. I think that's how you say it. Is that how you say his name? I'm sure we are completely butchering pronunciations for everything in this book. I tried to look up some pronunciation help, but I don't know if that really helped me. But yeah, I kind of like Jang. And again, I compare everything to everything else. I kind of felt he was like a Dumbledore kind of character, in that we don't really know what his motivations are, because he's not explaining anything to her. He just keeps assuming that she'll know and that she's just going to understand at some point. without ever telling her anything. And I kind of felt like, one, that's so rude. Like, you need to give more. You're the teacher. You have to explain. Like, it bugged the crap out of me that he is supposed to be a teacher and teaching her these things, but never once did he explain why she shouldn't be contacting the god and why that was a dangerous thing to do. And like, not even at the end when she's confronting him, he still isn't explain. No one's explaining it to her. I feel like if she had more background information, perhaps she might not have made the decisions that she did. But I still found his character to be really intriguing because I feel like he had good intentions. He just didn't know how to get them across. Which is, I think, the same thing with Dumbledore. Like, he also didn't know how to explain what was going to happen without, like, not explaining it. I don't know. Stuff like that, I always get invested, but then frustrated.
What were your thoughts on Alton, his character?
You know,
Because I was very conflicted by him throughout the entire book, where I never outright hated him, but I also wasn't sure.
I was frustrated because, again, we're only seeing him through Rin's eyes. So we don't know, like, who he is. He was, and I felt really, by the end of the book, I felt really bad for him because we don't really know much about him throughout most of the story. We just know, like, he's like this god at the school, and that everybody looks up to him, even the instructors. And like, we don't know why, beyond he's a good fighter. That's the only information we really get about him. And like, I kept wanting more about him. Like, I really wanted a relationship to bloom between the two of them, because I felt like of anybody in the book, the two of them would have been like close in some capacity because they had a lot in common. But that never happens. But here's the thing that bothered me a little bit about that was that she, like, Rin, like, gets really deeply invested in it and like loves people for no reason. Like, at no point did Alton do anything to warrant her affection like that. Like, she became like so devoted to him and loved him. And I'm like, why? He's done nothing but abuse you. Like, he's at no point done anything that would make you want to love him. And all of a sudden, it was just like a switch flips in her head. And I just never quite grasped why. And like, I feel like he was a really troubled and tormented character, but we didn't really get to see any of that. Sometimes I think in books like this, I almost wish it was multi-perspective, because I think if we could have gotten some of his perspective, he as a character would have made more sense. But I don't know. I don't really know how I feel about him overall. Like, I can't say he was a favorite character because I don't think we got to know enough about him to have that kind of like devotion. Same with Neza. Like, we go from hating him to her like being his best friend, and I'm like, what happened? How? Why? Like, that was just out of nowhere. I don't know. And the fact that his death affected her so deeply felt weird to me because it was so sudden. Like, literally 2 chapters before, you were mortal enemies, and now you're best friends, and everything's great. And I don't know. That Rin's relationships were always very conflicted like that, though. Like, the only person I feel like she didn't have a conflicting relationship with was Kite, but I think he was just one of those characters. Like, he's the kind of person that gets along with everybody and is just like an easygoing guy. So he's actually liked Rin for her as a person, as opposed to being just like colleagues. Does that make sense? We'll look at comments because, like, I can't see anything on the screen. Okay. Okay. Yes, Nikki says, I think her relationships were very self-serving. They were. And like, I don't know, I kind of wanted more from her in her relationships, like, beyond just like, I'm devoted to now because I am. I don't know. That's just not how I think, I guess. And like, maybe some people do think like that. Maybe some people are just like, suddenly devoted for no apparent reason. But I just didn't quite agree like that should have happened that way. What other relationships were there between characters? Something I was talking about was the fact that I thought it was interesting that there's almost no female characters in this book beyond Rin. Like there are a couple that we are sort of introduced to throughout the story, but like we don't get to know any of them at all. Like, what is it? I don't know how you say the one, Nang, and Benka, and then Jima was like the head of the school, right? And then the Empress. That's it. Oh, and Kara, Kara. How do you say that name?
I know who you're referring to.
Yeah, but none of them get enough, like, I don't want to say screen time, page time for us to get to know them much as a character. So I thought that was interesting that this is such a male-dominated book. Like it was an interesting choice for a woman author to write such a male-dominated book. And I don't know if that's just because of the culture of the story, or I don't know. I just wish there had been more like female companionship happening in the story, because that would have been nice to see.
One thing I did appreciate though is there was no romantic relationships at all.
No, and I kept
story.
expecting that to happen.
Yeah.
I was certain at the end that there was going to be some kind of a romantic thing with her and Alton. I was glad that it didn't go that way, because I kind of almost felt more like they could be siblings. They're close in age, and like they don't know that they're not. Quite possible. What about her relationship with Jang? Teacher-student relationships. Your thoughts on that?
I enjoyed the stuff towards the early parts in like the first half of the book with him actually like teaching her and like doing all the lore class stuff. I thought that was all really interesting and kind of fun, but also towards the end and after he graduates, I don't know how I felt about him afterwards and how he was really hiding stuff from her. It kind of bothered me a bit. So I didn't hate his character. I don't feel like I really hated any of the main characters in this book. I definitely didn't like him.
Yeah. Maybe that'll happen in the next book. We'll learn more. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like he was not a very good teacher.
And I thought it was funny, like at the beginning when he just didn't show up to his own class.
He doesn't even come to class. He's high all the time, and like we don't get an explanation for that. I'm like, how is this happening?
How was he allowed to be teaching here?
I know, and I didn't really understand any of that. But then I kind of get that they're trying to find a shaman, find someone worthy of becoming a shaman, which is apparently a really like elite and difficult thing to become. Understandably so, once you learn more about what that means as the story progresses, and you find out what happens to these people, that can be a lot, and that they all end up insane and locked up in this mountain at some point in their lives. Yeah, which makes me wonder, is Alton really dead? Because they kept pointing out how once you are consumed by the god, you cannot die. And then they just like, oh, he's dead. I'm like, is he though? I don't think he is, because they made such a point of pointing out that that people who become shamans don't actually die. So what happened to him?
I mean, isn't the rule of stories, if you don't see a body, then is it really dead?
I mean, I don't think he is.
Since we don't see his body.
I'm not convinced he's dead, even though everyone else seems to be convinced he's dead. I'm like, but no, you set it up that he's not. So I'm expecting to see him. I also kept waiting for Neza to like somehow come back. Like I didn't fully believe he was dead either, and I kind of wonder if he got captured.
Like also, if we don't see his body, then is he really dead?
So granted, there was a lot of bodies.
But we don't see his body.
But we don't ever see him again. So I wonder if he's also still alive. I'm going to actually read the next book in this series, because I don't usually do that. I typically abandon a series after the first book unless I'm like super invested. Like it's rare for me to read an entire trilogy. So the fact that I'm even considering continuing this is saying something. But I'm like fascinated by the historical background here. So that is my motivation for continuing. So let's, I don't know, you want to move on to the plot now? Covered all the different characters that we can talk about. The plot of this book was so like a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know how to talk about it.
It felt like reading multiple books
It
in one.
did. I feel like the first half and the second half are completely different books.
Like, I think it's a trilogy too, because as I was reading it, I was like, wow, and this really all in one book. Like
It's
this
a
feels
lot.
like book 2 content, but no, we're still on book 1.
I kind of felt like it could have ended like with the school stuff. And then the next book would pick up with the war, but no, we just kept going. And I was just, okay, that's a lot. What's going to happen in a book 2 if there's already this much happening? So I don't know. I thought the plot was really interesting. I'm fascinated. We're going to get into the history. I don't know how to separate the plot and the history. I have it written down on my little notes here as 2 separate things, but I don't know how to separate. So we're going to do both. We're going to talk about the historical background and the plot. So I went into this knowing that this is based on the rape of Nanking. And that made me more excited to read it because I like dark things apparently, but I've always been fascinated by that historical event because it is something you don't hear almost anything about, like, which fascinates me. Like, why? How has this become so hidden in history? Like, there's a lot of documented research. Like, they documented it. There's lots of video footage. There's like survivors who told their stories. There are diaries. There's a lot. And yet, like, almost nobody knows that this event even happened. So I'm always interested in learning about things like that. So knowing that that's what this book was, I already knew quite a bit about that because I read Flowers of War a couple of years ago. I saw the movie. I watched, there's a movie called John Rabe about a German Nazi who was in Nanking at the time and like set up this zone, the safety zone there where he rescued like thousands of people. And and there was another movie I watched too with what is his name? Jonathan Rhys Meyers, I think. Children of Wang Di, maybe something like that. All of that takes place around the events of the rape of Nanking. So I kind of had the background information going in, so I knew what I was in for going into this book. And I think if you didn't know that going in, this book can be a lot. This book is troubling, especially because the first half is almost lighthearted. Like the first half and the second half don't match each other in tone at all. Like, which surprised me because I remember like starting it and going, this is almost a happy go lucky, like kid going to a new magic school kind of story. And like, that's not what I thought I was getting. And so for the turn in the second half, I was just like, wow, we just like flipped it completely. But I feel like I'm taking over too much. What are your thoughts, Sarah, about the story as a whole, the plot? What did you think?
I mean, again, I read this differently from you because while I was aware that it was based on history, I didn't really know anything about the history it was based on. So I was going into this completely blind. So I was surprised by everything, but like, not surprised in a bad way. Like, as awful as it was, like, it was never too much for me, I guess. So I found it all very fascinating. Like, I think I did. I don't know. But I feel like it was a book where you either really loved the first half or you really loved the second half. And I'm not sure I like one better than the other. Like, I enjoyed both sides of the book pretty much equally. Like, I was riveted from the beginning and just continued to be riveted till the end.
Yeah, like I did think that there was a weird lull in the middle. Like the start of the war, I feel like we got bogged down a bit in the strategizing and just like planning and all of that, and it pulled the story down.
Like I didn't, like I said, the strategizing kind of went over my head, but I liked like meeting all these new characters. Like, I think
see that's something too. I mean, I didn't dislike it necessarily in this book, but that can be something that takes me out of a story. If we are introduced to too many new characters halfway through, that can throw me because I'm like, wait, I just got to know these characters. Why are you giving me new ones? Like that can be a lot. But I did really like okay, I'm gonna completely butcher this. I looked it up to make sure I was saying it right. I think it's called the Sikha. It's not psych because I kept calling it psych in my head. I was like, that just sounds wrong in my brain. Like, I don't know. I felt like that couldn't be the right pronunciation. So I looked it up and I think it's pronounced something like Sikha or Sikha, right? I made you listen to. So I liked getting to meet. Found the whole concept of the shamanism stuff really, really interesting. Something that I thought was especially interesting about it is that this is basically an atheistic society, but there's gods, but they kind of behave like what you would expect gods in an atheistic society to be like, and that they don't really help. They're not there to give you blessings and to like take care of you, but they can be called upon and they will take over and then do damage because that's just what they are. That's what they become.
I think this book has one of my favorite fantasy magic systems. I just think that the whole concept of shamanism and like being possessed by gods like that is really cool.
To me, that was really terrifying. Like the idea that they can like kind of possess you and then destroy you, like, and that you can choose this willingly. I'm like, why would you choose that? Like, I could never go and just like, sure, yeah, take over my body, make sure I can never ever be normal again, and then like I'll never die, but I'll be tortured in a mountain for the rest of my life. Like, that's terrible. There's no good outcome here.
I didn't say I liked happy things.
No, I guess not. So like, I don't know, that to me was just like insane. So I found it interesting, but also like very stressful that you would even choose such a fate for yourself, even if it meant like getting your revenge. I feel like revenge too was a huge part of the story. And while I can understand why, what happens to Alton in the story, like when you hear about the experimentation, that's a real thing that did happen. And I feel like I know the name of it, but I can't remember. Something like 7 something. Do you remember? It's a number. I don't know. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but that was a real thing that happened to people that they were experimented on, and like they did all these really horrible things to people. So knowing that that's what happened to Alton was very disturbing, and I don't know. There was just so many different plot elements happening within the story. It was a lot to take in.
And this book is overwhelming on purpose, I feel.
I think so too. Like there's just a lot.
It all felt very intentional, like it's gonna keep going. It's just you think it's over and then it keeps going.
Oh. I know, I like the end of the book. I'm like, why is this not over yet? Or shouldn't we be done? Like it just got like more and more upsetting. Yeah, Mickey says the drug use was hard. Yeah, there was a lot of I mean, I understand why it was there because you know the Poppy War is like the opium wars that actually happened in China, and so like I understand the reasoning for that, but the way that they handled it was kind of, I don't want to say off-putting, but kind of off-putting, I guess, is the right word for it. That it was just so casual. But yeah, seeing Alton almost like completely disabled because all he could do was like be high because when he wasn't, it was too much for him. It was kind of upsetting. Okay, so do we have any other plot we want to discuss? The actual like massacre that happens in chapter 21. I saw somebody say that I think they commented on my Instagram that they were traumatized by chapter 21. So like I knew going in like, okay, chapter 21 is going to be hard. And like I remember I was reading it one night and I got to the end of chapter 20 and I went, don't want to read this now. I'm going to put this away and come back to it tomorrow because I didn't want to read that right as I was getting ready to go to sleep. And I'm so glad I chose not to read that right before I went to sleep because I would have had some awful, awful dreams. Knowing that the author stated that that was all, like, everything that happened in that chapter was taken from history makes it that much worse. And so, like, I wouldn't say that I was traumatized by it because, like, I've read dark stuff before, and, like, I am made of ice, I guess. I don't know. I can handle most dark stuff, but that was still, like, really hard to read.
Like, you got the warning for chapter 21.
I did get the warning, so.
I just experienced it as it happened. I'm like, oh.
You didn't even tell me, though.
I mean,
I said I knew it was going to get dark, and you just kind of went.
I know you were really dark stuff.
I know, so I don't usually need any kind of trigger warnings or content warnings. I read dark things for fun, so, like, I knew, but yeah, it was still, knowing that it was based on history made it so much worse. So, if you want to know more about that and you don't want to read, like, a nonfiction book, I highly recommend watching the movie Flowers of War. I think that's one of those instances where the movie is a little bit better than the book, and we're gonna probably watch it maybe tomorrow. I don't know. We're not gonna watch it tonight, I don't think, because I don't think we are gonna have time for that this evening. But we're gonna watch that soon because I feel like it's good historical background going into this story. And it's not as graphic as what happens in this book, though. Like, they show things and they talk about things in the movie, but you don't, like, see the babies in the barrels and, like, the really awful things that go on there. Like, there was some stuff in this book that I was like, I don't know that I needed to know that it was this bad. Like, you didn't have to go into such detail. Like, I know, I get it. I know what this was. I know what happened, but I almost felt like it was, like, too much. Because it was a lot. There's a lot in this book. I feel like this book was a challenge at times just because it was so dark and heavy. But I'm still going to try to read the next book because
me too.
I enjoyed the dark, I guess. So yeah, so, like, we've talked a bit about the history. Another thing that I want to recommend if you are seeking out more information about this is we watched last night a documentary. Do you remember what it was called? Is it called Iris Chang and the Rape of Nanking?
Something like that.
She wrote a book. Iris Chang is an author, and she wrote a book called The Rape of Nanking. And they made a documentary about her.
Because it was, like, the first published book about.
Yeah, she explains in the documentary that, like, growing up, she'd heard stories about it from her parents and her grandparents. But when she tried to go, like, learn more at the library, there was nothing. Like, she couldn't find anything that would explain any of it to her. And not even in, like, Chinese writing, she couldn't find anything. So as an adult, she's like, I'm going to take this upon myself and research it, and I'm going to write the book. And that's what the documentary is about, her, like, interviewing different survivors. And even, like, she interviews a Japanese soldier who was there and talks to people who were children at the time. And it was really interesting, but I'll warn you that it is very sad because Iris Chang kills herself because she could not handle the weight of what she was carrying for these people, which is just so sad. And I didn't know that going into the documentary, so I'm going to let you guys know because I wish I had been aware that they're going to be that upset. Like, I knew it was going to be upsetting because I knew the content of what happens in the massacre was pretty upsetting. But having that on top of it, I think, was a lot. So I'm going to let you guys know that ahead of time. But it was just under an hour.
It was beautifully done.
It was so beautifully done. Like, it's definitely worth your time. It was on Amazon Prime. It's free right now. So I highly recommend checking that out because I think it was a really nice tie-in, especially for Sarah because she didn't know hardly anything about this historical time period. So if you want that, I highly recommend checking that out. Okay. So what do we want to go ahead and do the questions?
I don't even remember what the questions in there.
Yeah, I know that we have questions in the back of our copy. I don't know if that's in everybody's copy. But we're just going to do a couple of them because I didn't think we needed to do all of them. Like they have one here all about the art of war by Sun Tzu, and I'm just like, don't really want to discuss that. That stuff kind of blew over my head. I don't understand a lot of the strategizing and stuff. And I don't know, how do you pronounce the name of the school? I've been pronouncing it both Seingard and Sinegard, and I don't know which one is right. Is it Sinegard or Seingard? How do you pronounce it? I don't know. I'm going to say Sinegard because for some reason that one sounds more accurate to me. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So if you were a student at Sinegard, what track would you pledge? I think I would do lore just because I think the whole mythology thing and learning about the pantheon and all of that is really interesting.
Be possessed by a god.
I don't want to be a shaman, no, but I want to learn about it because I think it's interesting. But I don't see myself doing the strategy. I don't see I'm not a combat. Like what? I can't. No, I'm a twig. I would break. So I would want to fight. Maybe. I don't want to become a medic. So I guess all that's left to me is the lore. Like, what else was there? Was there another track? Okay, Mickey says Sinegard was how it was pronounced in the audiobook. Thank you. That's how do they pronounce the name of the military group she joins? Is it Sikha? How do they pronounce that in the audiobook? I'm very curious because I did not know how to say that for most of the book and it was bothering me. So what would you pledge?
Honestly, I would probably do lore too. But
I knew you'd pick lore because you're a mythology person. Okay, yeah, Mickey says it's Sikha. I was saying it right. Oh, I'm so proud of myself that I got it. I was pronouncing it right. Okay. I'm usually terrible at pronunciation, so that's exciting. Mickey would do medical. See, I'm not good with that kind of stuff. I don't like doctory things. I don't like touching other people and having other people touch me. That's just so I could not do that. I'm gonna have to look for the audiobook for the next one, maybe, just so I can hear things pronounced. Okay, we already talked about the relationships because we did that when we talked about characters. So we're gonna skip that one. Although we didn't circle this one, but let's talk about it. Human connection is a huge theme in this novel. After graduating Sinegard, Rin, being an outsider in many ways, finally finds a place where she belongs. How does her previous experience of exclusion affect the relationship with her found family? What does Rin gain by being part of this group? Or would it be safe to say she's never part of a group? I don't think she's ever been, she's in a found family. Like, that's not,
like there's a found family in the book.
No, yeah, that exists, but Bryn doesn't belong to it. I kind of feel like she's a very isolated person, but I think she's done that to herself on purpose. I feel like she doesn't trust anybody, and she doesn't trust herself to like care about people enough to become friends. Like, I almost feel like Kate adopted her more than like they didn't really become friends together. He just kind of like, I'm gonna be your friend and make you normal. Because like she's just not a likable enough character to like be friendly, which bothered me. I really wanted her to have a female friendship. I feel like that was needed in this book and it just never happens because she doesn't have that kind of relationship with anybody. So yeah. She pushes them all away. Yeah, she does. She's kind of a cold person that way, I think.
In juxtaposition, she's a cold person that does like fire magic.
Yes, but fire, yes. Maybe that's kind of part of it. Like when you're full of fire, you like naturally people want to avoid you because you're too hot, and like maybe that's part of it too. I don't know. Things to think about. I don't know. Okay, so who would you say has the most control in the book? How do control and power play together in this novel? I will say Rin has the least control in this book. Like, for the half of the book, she doesn't even understand her own power. But they keep saying how powerful she is, but you never see it because she doesn't see it. It's not until like the very end that she like it clicks for her and she's able to use this ability and this power. in a way that like actually does something. You kind of get a glimpse of it like in the trials at school, and you get a glimpse of it at in the war when she kind of explodes. But then she's never really in control of it until the very end. So, who do you think does have control? Anybody?
The gods.
I'm not even sure the gods do. It's kind of pointed out that they don't have any control over what they do either. They just they can't reel it in. That's why they're so dangerous. If they had control, I think that the shamanism stuff wouldn't have been so dangerous. Oh yeah, what is his name? Nikki says the second Chang'an. Is that his name? Chang'an. I'm like, I'm gonna find it. Chang'an. Yeah, I will say Chang'an and his twin Kara. I don't know how you say that either. Chang'an and Kara probably are the most in control of their abilities. But we really don't see Kara use her abilities much. There's birds, but I don't know what they do or what her power is. I will say the anchor twin thing was upsetting. Being a mother of twins, I'm always interested in characters that are twins, and the fact they're anchor twins, and like if one of them is hurt, the other one hurts too. And if one dies, the other dies. I'm like, that is scary. Like, and the fact that they're separated for most of the story, I'm like, I would think you'd want to be together at all times. So you're like protecting each other, since if one dies, so does the other. That's frightening to me. But yeah, besides the fact that they have that going on, I thought the two of them probably had the most control. Because I don't even think Jang has control. Like he might have the most power overall, since he's the most aware of his abilities, but like, is he in control? I don't know. What do you think? Who is your least favorite character? You have a least. I'm gonna say June.
Yeah.
He was kind of an asshole for no reason whatsoever. Like, the fact that he kicks Ren out of his class. Like, excuse me, yes you are. Like, that's literally why you're here. So I don't know. I found that was very like rude for no reason, and then like he just never got better over the course of he was just always like that guy.
For such a prestigious school, Synagogue has a pretty sucky teacher.
It does. And I'm like, how is this school so prestigious? You've got one teacher randomly kicking people out of his class, like, oh, you don't understand this? Well, I'm not going to teach it to you, like, for no reason. And then you've got a teacher who literally never shows up and is high all of the time. Like, what? I don't know. I felt like they needed a new teachers at that school. It was weird to me. Yeah. So let's see. Do we have any other questions we wanted to get to? Oh yeah. Okay. So the last question here is, where do you hope the story goes in book 2, The Dragon Republic?
I hope there's a dragon in it.
I don't think there will be. Ooh, is it just start raining? I hear lots of rain all of a sudden. Okay. Sorry for me getting so distracted.
We're going to discover this new place called the Dragon Republic, where it's a place full of dragons, and the dragons are gonna take over.
Well, historically, I think that this book is going to follow like the civil war that happens like right at the end of World War II with the nationalists and the communists. So I assume that if Rin is supposed to be based on Mao Zedong, that we're going to get a long walk, the long march across the interior of China, and we're going to get like a lot of that kind of political intrigue stuff. I'm assuming the Empress is the nationalist side. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know. We just watched a crash course video because I wanted to catch Sarah up on some of the history stuff. Since we haven't done that, or you haven't, did you ever study that history? I know we covered some of it, but like, it was a long time ago. So yeah, we watched a crash course video so we could catch up on some of that. But so I assume that's what we're gonna get with book 2, and I'm very interested to see more about this Empress character, because we don't really get to know what the heck is going on there. I felt like that kept getting like tossed around, and like no one's explaining to me, who is this Empress? Why is she doing this? Why would she give you up like what happened here. I'm also really interested to see, like, is Alton really dead? Is Neza really dead? I don't think either of them are. I kind of feel like both of their deaths were abrupt and there was no body, and so there's no proof that they are dead. I feel like if Neza is alive, it's going to be a Peter Malark situation, and he's been captured and tortured and maybe not in control of his mind anymore.
I feel like out of the two of them, Neza is the most likely to still be alive. Like Alton, I feel like if he did permanently die, like his death made more sense as a final moment.
It did, but also they spent too much time explaining why you can't die if you are possessed by a god, and then explaining how he was so possessed by the god that he was able to do that. Tells me that he's not dead. That's just me. I don't know. I guess we'll find out.
He fell, and he doesn't exist anymore. It's just the god. I don't know.
It's just the phoenix. Maybe, but I don't know. I guess we'll see if we continue reading it. Yes, Mickey says Neza would be very valuable given who his dad is. He would be valuable to take, but would they know that's who that is? Were they aware that they were kidnapping him, or were they just like random soldier, take him? I don't know. But the fact that we never saw a body made me wonder the whole time, like, is he dead though? I don't think he is. But I guess we'll find out. But I really hope we do get some more backstory. I want backstory on Jang. I want to know what the heck's going on there. And I want to know more about the Empress. Those are the things that, like, I really need in book 2. So I hope that both of those things happen. So are you going to continue reading the series, or do you think that the Poppy War was not your thing and that you just don't want to continue? I'm definitely going to try to pick up the next book. I already bought the ebook was on sale last week. I hadn't even finished the Poppy War yet. The ebook went on sale. I went, I'm going to just buy that.
I bought it too.
I might read it. So I do have the second book.
Also, I feel like in a book I would rather read physically because it doesn't really feel like bedtime reading since I read my Kindle at night.
Same.
So, I don't know.
Perhaps that's true. I might want to get myself a physical copy.
Read something a little, fluffier before bed.
Not always. I started. What is the name of that book I started, Sarah? I keep forgetting. It's gotten worse since we last spoke. I just started that last night, and I went, I shouldn't be reading this before bed. It's gonna get dark, and I'm probably gonna finish it tonight before bed. So I'm gonna have some interesting dreams tonight. Why don't we go ahead and remind everybody about what we're reading this month? The book for July. I'm just skipping June completely. The book for June is The Library of the Unwritten by A.J. Hackwith. Sarah has been hyping this to me. She hasn't read it either, though.
I read like the first few chapters of it, so I've gotten a little bit of it. It really gives me like a nice combination of I would say Good Omens mixed with the Magicians TV series. Like those are the vibes I was getting.
That's very exciting because I like both of those things.
It's really fun. I can't wait to finish
it. It says on the tagline on this cover is "The Good Place meets Law and Order Bibliophile Crime Unit." That's an interesting, and that's blurred by Sean McGuire. So I'm like, okay, I'm in. But yeah, Library in Hell, where books go to die. Unfinished books go to die. Sounds great. I'm excited. So yes. So I'm excited to read this. So make sure you can get yourself a copy and read along with us. And we'll have our live show probably the first week of July. Actually, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should aim to have it at the very end of this month. I'll have to look at a calendar. Because now that I'm thinking about it, the 4th of July weekend might be a bit busy for people. Maybe you won't be able to hang with us in a live show. I will have to see. I will let you guys know as soon as I can when the live show will be. I need to be better about planning these things so that like we can all be on top of it so we can all participate. So thanks so much for hanging out with us. It was a lot of fun talking about the Poppy War. I hope you guys enjoyed reading the book, and we'll see you next time. Happy reading. Bye. Bye.